Even though the House has just completed a vote and we're expecting maybe a couple of other members here, I think in the interest of time I will start the hearing here, and I would call to order the Committee on House Administration for today's hearing on the United States Capitol Police. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members may submit any materials that they wish to be included, and the quorum is present so we might proceed. But I'm just going to tell you before we start, I just mentioned this to the ranking member as we were walking down the hall here together after votes. He may have had one of his finest moments just a moment ago because he spoke for the entire Congress and the entire country and perhaps the entire world so eloquently about what happened with the train crash in your area there, and how well the first responders, how quickly they, and it's sort of interesting, here we are going to talk about the Capitol Police, but here was a national tragedy. I just mentioned to him one of our state senators in Michigan, her daughter, 39 years old, was one that perished. So it went around the country, but you spoke so very, very well, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciated everything that you said there, very, very much.
Thank you, Madam.
And I'd also like to take a moment to introduce and to welcome, before we start our hearing here, our newest member to the House Administration Committee. And of course, that's Mark Walker, who represents the 6th District in North Carolina. He's in his first term here in Congress. Came very highly recommended to us that he had an interest in this committee, and we are delighted that he's here. His background is, I think, going to be very much an asset to our committee. He was previously served his community as a pastor, actually, in Greensboro, North Carolina. Worked in a small business in the private sector. Both of those attributes are going to be very much needed here. So we certainly appreciate that. Looking forward to putting him to work here and his input on our committee. We're meeting here today to discuss the United States Capitol Police. This law enforcement agency is unique, really, unique maybe in the world. Certainly, probably not what most would consider a typical community police force. And that's because the mission of the Capitol Police is to protect and to serve the United States Capitol, which, of course, is the citadel of democracy of the world. And there's no denying the fact that this building and this institution are very dramatic symbols of our free society, which is based on self-government. This also makes the Capitol campus and this institution a target of those who hate our freedoms, hate our values here in America. And in fact, some say that because of this, perhaps we need even greater restrictions on access to the Capitol campus here, but obviously that would be totally counter to what this nation stands for. And one of the many important rights secured on behalf of the American people in the First Amendment in our Constitution is the right to redress their grievances before their government. The American people must have access to those that they send to the Capitol to represent their interests, and they must also have access to the grounds of our Capitol building to also exercise their constitutionally guaranteed right to peaceably assemble. Since Congress created the U.S. Capitol Police, actually back in 1828, they have worked very hard to fulfill this dual mission, really, of safety and accessibility. And every member of Congress, the staff of the Capitol, in the Capitol here, and the office buildings, and the American people as a whole understand that this is no small task that we have missioned them with. And we commend and we have the utmost respect for the many men and women who uphold their sworn duty to act as protectors and defenders of the law day in and day out, 24/7. Each officer has come here willingly, answering the call to serve and to protect. The Capitol Police Law Enforcement Agency is just not a few individuals, they are many who serve as one to meet their mission in protecting our complex. So we hold this hearing today as part of our committee's jurisdiction to review, to have oversight for the safety and the security of the Capitol and its facilities, each member of Congress, all of the staff, and most importantly, of course, the security and the safety of the millions of Americans who visit each and every year. Our committee works very closely with the Capitol Police on a daily basis to ensure that they have the tools, the authority, and the support that they need to keep our Capitol safe and secure for everyone. And the security needs of the Capitol complex are always at the forefront of our minds because we all understand the threats. There's a constant need to review security protocols, make certain those protocols are thoughtfully developed, and ensure that the protocols are reviewed, tested, and deployed against the threats. The importance of this process has not diminished over the years. In fact, new and verifiable threats have only increased, and we must work together to adapt. As with any law enforcement organization, the responsibility for meeting the mission begins and ends at the top. in this case with the Chief of Police, Kim Dine. And while our committee meets on a regular basis to discuss the security status of our Capitol and all of its inhabitants with the Capitol Police leadership, we felt it was very timely to have a general oversight hearing to hear directly from the Chief of the Capitol Police about his force. And obviously, we all recognize, Chief, that there are very sensitive aspects about the operations and the capabilities of the Capitol Police that we can probably not discuss in an open forum. But it's important to note, I think, as well, that most often threats are discovered and they're investigated and they are resolved without them ever becoming public. And often they do that, almost always really, in cooperation with other agencies. And due to the inherent professionalism of the force, that's a type of flawless response that we have come to expect from the U.S. Capitol Police. But certainly some of the recent events, the gyrocopter incident brings these threats to the forefront. Many have questions how the gyrocopter was actually able to fly all the way to the front lawn of the Capitol. However, I will note this. Actually protecting the restricted airspace over Washington, D.C. is not the mission of the Capitol Police. That falls to other agencies. In fact, I can remember, I think it was during President Reagan's funeral, when a former governor of Kentucky, his general aviation aircraft, his state aircraft, came into the restricted airspace, a mistake, pilot error, but the Air Force actually scrambled their jets, I think, on that day. But I do remember the Capitol Police doing their duty to evacuate the Capitol campus flawlessly. And again, in that instance, the job of the Capitol Police was not to so much eliminate the air threat in the restricted airspace, but to protect those who work here or are visiting the Capitol campus. And I would say this, I had a briefing after that, many of us did, and I told the Chief then that I thought the Capitol Police performed very well once the gyrocopter landed, almost flawlessly, really. However, I would also say that there were some aspects of the event, which I'm going to be looking forward to hearing from the Chief on, which we would like to talk a bit about when did the Capitol Police know that the individual was heading for the Capitol, and if we had some heads up, how would that affect the response then, and how does it affect the response going forward as lessons learned. And I would also like to note that in that incident and others, I have taken issue with the lack of communication. During that incident, actually the best source of information that I had, and I think many members have, I was watching cable TV, actually, looking at some of the different news channels. And so I think the police work was very impressive, but the communications could be improved, and that is an area that we want to have a bit of oversight on, although, again, I've raised these concerns with the Chief, and it does appear to me that the communications protocols have already been improved. Also, there have been 3 separate incidents that perhaps normally you wouldn't talk about publicly, but they've been in all the media outlets, so it's quite known, where officers have left their assigned firearms unattended. And these are very serious breaches, I think, that alarm all of us, quite frankly. When you're in an open and public environment with literally millions of visitors each and every year, securing your weapon is of primary importance. So I understand, again, that these incidents are being investigated, and again, normally wouldn't talk about it openly, but certainly at this point, I hope to hear a bit about how they're being handled, whether the Capitol Police has the training and the resources that it needs, what steps are being taken to ensure that these kinds of serious incidents are not repeated. The purpose of the hearing is to examine the current operations and the responses taken by the Capitol Police, particularly those leadership decisions which have an effect on training, on readiness, and on the morale, the overall morale of the force of the United States Capitol Police. I would say this, we certainly all understand that now is a particularly challenging time for law enforcement across the entire country, certainly not just here, across the entire country. And we are also very aware that the Capitol Police operate in sort of an asymmetrical environment. And the purpose of this hearing is certainly not to second-guess every single action that has been taken in pursuit of security. However, our committee does have the oversight responsibility for conducting a hearing such as this, and we intend to carry out our responsibilities. Of course, nearly all of the events that have occurred in the public view are met with textbook responses that display, again, the standard of conduct, the professionalism that Congress expects of its law enforcement agency and is demanded by the American people as well. And we would ask the Chief to provide us as much information as possible in an open setting about these incidents, such as what was learned, training improvements, where the training proved successful in the cases of the unattended firearms, what kinds of corrective actions has been taken, again, that you could discuss openly. And lastly, but likely most importantly, what your plan is for the department to move forward. And I think we always want to, when we're spending our time looking in the rearview mirror, want to look forward as much as possible, always. And one of the questions, and I mentioned this to the chief before we started, that I'm going to want to bring up, and perhaps more of a discussion amongst even the members here, is exploring how the chain of command is structured. Because right now, the chief of police reports to the Capitol Police Board, which is made up of the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House, the Sergeant of Arms in the Senate, and the architect of the Capitol. And this was a police board that was comprised back in the 1800s. And it just seems like it would be a timely thing for us perhaps to discuss whether or not this reporting structure complicates performing the duties that we have an expectation of the Capitol Police and its chief, and if it's the best management structure. And then finally, I would ask the chief to explain again the leadership steps that he has taken and is taking to guide the law enforcement agency forward. So I'm very hopeful that the result of this hearing will be that we all gain a better understanding of the challenges faced by the Capitol Police, areas where some of the changes or improvements can be made, and finally how this committee can assist, which is what we really want to do, how we can assist the United States Capitol Police in performing their mission, because we all share the common goal of protecting the United States Capitol, the entire campus here, as I say, not just the members or the staff, but most importantly, the American people, the millions of American people that visit each and every day. So I certainly thank the chief for his appearance before our committee today, and I would now like to recognize my colleague, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I join my friend Chairman Miller in welcoming the chief to this hearing. We wish we saw you more often, although under different circumstances. The congressional community and the American public need to be sure that they are safe in the United States Capitol and its surrounding areas. I believe that strong oversight and policy direction are vital elements of building and, unfortunately, in some instances, rebuilding that trust. The Committee on House Administration and the other legislative and oversight committees of the House and Senate need to be sure that we are not an afterthought in the process of managing this department. If something potentially embarrassing happens, which reflects on the Capitol Police, risk to public safety, or is likely to become publicly known, run. Don't walk to this committee. We don't want to find out from local Hill newspapers, tweets from journalists, or through the rumor mill. Recent incidents with officers losing their weapons, the gyrocopter landing on the West Front lawn, the tragic murders in the Navy Yard. It is my understanding that several of these issues are still under investigation and subject to the legal process. But none of that reduces the committee's obligation to know the facts and the department's obligation to be forthcoming. I have been and continue to be unwavering in my support of the Capitol Police. Chairman Miller and I have many conversations on the USCP, and on virtually every issue, we are in complete agreement. I think I can safely say that we both want to do everything and anything possible to ensure that you and the force is successful. On a daily business, rank and file officers may be called upon to put their lives on the line to protect visitors, members, and staff. As the son of a police officer, I am intimately aware of that tremendous burden and commitment it requires. But quite frankly, I have been deeply troubled by several recent occurrences that have forced me to question the leadership of the force. I look forward to your testimony, and I look forward to learning how you plan to continue to strive to be the leader that they deserve. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Are there any other members that wish to be recognized for an opening statement? Chair recognizes Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, and thank you, Chief Dine, for being here today and offering testimony to the committee. There have been media reports on the rarity of a Capitol Police chief appearing before the committee that is in fact charged with oversight of the force. I don't think that it should be unusual, and hope that this may be the start of a new tradition of frequent appearances by you and your successors. I appreciate your service as well as that of each and every one of the officers under your command. And I don't consider it my job to criticize you or others in your command structure just when things go wrong. I think this committee can and should be as much a part of your support network as the Capitol Police are a supporting agency of the U.S. Congress. However, that requires open and honest communication between us. And while I recognize the often sensitive nature of your work in terms of security, I also recognize that we are both public servants and have a responsibility to submit ourselves to public scrutiny from time to time. Again, I appreciate your appearance today, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. And I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Other members? Mr. Vargas.
I, too, want to thank you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing. I also want to thank the Chief. I sat on the San Diego City Council. We had responsibility for the city police there. I was also in the State Assembly and the State Senate. And I have to say the professionalism here has been fantastic. I, in particular, want to call out Sergeant Stephen Merle. We've had a couple issues with people that have mobility issues in my district that have come to the Capitol, and he has been fantastic. One lady in particular asked me if I would pass along her thanks to him. As again, his name is Sergeant Stephen Merle. And again, I thank you for this hearing. And again, my experiences have been very, very positive, and I appreciate it again. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Nugent from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate Ranking Member your support of the Capitol Police and to Chief Dine. Listen, after 38 years of being in law enforcement that I have experience in and being a chief administrator, I know it can be a thankless job from time to time. But, you know, the pressures do exist. And one of the things I think that this committee would like to see, or at least I would like to see, is more transparency with the agency and us. And it doesn't always have to be in a formal setting such as this. It can be on a one-on-one setting with any one of us as this goes forward. Obviously, we have great concerns. Reference to what's been in the media as it relates to officers leaving their weapons in areas that they shouldn't. In a gyrocopter landing, I don't think we need to go through every issue at this point in my comments, but I will tell you that we need to have a better understanding of the Capitol Police. It is probably the most unique law enforcement agency in the nation that I'm aware of, because your mission is really about protecting this campus and all of us, but as the chairman had mentioned, all the citizens that come here on a daily basis to view democracy in action. And yours is a job that not many people could do. And I will tell you, you're only as good as the folks that surround you in your up administration, but also the men and women that daily put on those uniforms and the vest to protect us. Without them, this doesn't happen, and we don't have an open setting like this. And so I want to make sure that we're doing everything to support you, but also support the men and women of this agency. And I think sometimes that gets lost, that there's actually people that kiss their husbands or wives goodbye in the morning and not knowing if they're going to come back tonight. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything in our power that they have a great working environment, and I'm sure you agree with that. So we want to hear what steps you're going to do to remedy some of the issues that have been brought up by members here today and that you're going to hear about later as we move forward. It's very important that we feel assured that you're the chief executive officer, you're the chief of police, that you have a good handle on it and what you're going to do to remedy it. You know, obviously we talk to your folks on a regular basis, and we want to make sure that their morale is high and that they want to stay here because we have a big investment in them. And so I want to hear from you what specific ideas you have to put in place to make sure that this elite force stays elite, has the training and the backing of its administration as we move forward. And Madam Chair, I yield back. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Other members? If not, let me formally introduce our witness, or one witness here today. Kim Dine is the 8th Chief of the United States Capitol Police and has served in this position since December of 2012. The Chief excuse me, has had a distinguished career in law enforcement for the last 39 years. He began his career with the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., where he was eventually appointed Assistant Chief of Police for the department. In 2002, he became the Chief of Police of the Frederick, Maryland Police Department, served there for 10 years. And as Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police, Chief Dine is responsible for commanding a force of nearly 2,000 sworn and civilian personnel who are very dedicated to provide comprehensive law enforcement, security, and protective operation services to the U.S. Congress, members, staff, and millions of annual visitors in the surrounding complex. So with that, Chief, we certainly appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to your comments. And there's normally a 5-minute period, but you take what you need and go through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Committee on House Administration to discuss the leadership of the United States Capitol Police. I'm joined here today by the Department's Chief of Operations, Assistant Chief Matthew Verderosa, and the Department's Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Richard Braddock, as well as some members of my executive management team. This afternoon, I'd like to provide the committee with a brief summary of my first 2.5 years leading the USCP and lay out for you my short and long-term vision and leadership priorities for the department. First, however, I'd like to thank the committee for its sustained and unwavering support for the United States Capitol Police. I am truly grateful for the support of the Congress and that of the Capitol Police Board. I would also be remiss if I did not recognize the brave women and men of the United States Capitol Police. Each and every day, they place themselves in harm's way to ensure that this great institution can carry out its critical role in legislating and providing 1/3 of the infrastructure for our great democracy. I firmly believe that the women and men of the USCP continually demonstrate professionalism, pride, and effectiveness in meeting the mission requirements for both routine operations and critical incident response, and do so proficiently. In December 2012, I was appointed by the Capitol Police Board to serve as the Chief of Police for the United States Capitol Police. Within the first 2 months on the job, I had the pleasure of leading the department during the 57th inauguration of the President of the United States. Since then, I have also overseen numerous State of the Union activities, concerts, National Peace Officers Memorial Services, joint meetings of the U.S. Congress, visits from heads of state, dignitaries and VIPs, codels, and demonstrations. I've also overseen unique situations during my tenure, such as the African Summit, which saw 50 heads of state visit the Capitol, ricin incidents in our mail facilities, operational activities in the Capitol complex as a result of the Navy Yard shooting, the October 3rd, 2013 vehicular shooting incident on Capitol Hill, the Concert for Valor, the impacts of demonstrations resulting from the Ferguson, Missouri police activity, 2 suicides on Capitol grounds within the last 2 years, and most recently, the National Capital Region event with the gyrocopter. However, response operations have not been the only focus of my leadership. In February 2014, the department fully implemented its new digitally encrypted radio system without issues or communication service interruptions. In 2014, the department also successfully achieved reaccreditation from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, CALEA, earning the gold standard in public safety accreditation. Further, we have continued our efforts to resolve recommendations provided by the United States Capitol Inspector General designed to improve our internal controls and management practices, including our controls over inventory of weapons and ammunition. I unequivocally understand the concerns regarding the recent issues related to the mishandling of weapons by some of our officers. There are no excuses for these mistakes. The department takes these incidents very seriously, and we will rely on our disciplinary process to provide the framework for accountability. USCP employees are held to a very high standard in terms of conduct and discipline. The USCP has a team of highly experienced, well-trained, professional investigators whose sole job function is to investigate internal conduct issues. This is done by conducting thorough, defendable, legally sufficient investigations into misconduct as well as employee-related matters. The first offense for a mishandled weapon typically receives a 5 or more day suspension without pay. I am considering increasing the minimum penalty to up to a 30-day suspension, all the way to termination for a first offense, and potential termination for any subsequent offense. This is not offered in response to these incidents, but rather my belief that any liability type of violation warrants strict disciplinary action. In reference to the mishandled weapons that have been publicized, it should be pointed out that employees are trained on safe handlings of firearms. Currently, basic training includes several weeks of weapons training, discussions on safe handling of weapons, and instruction on what to do in situations in which an employee uses the restroom. That said, I have directed the implementation of new elements to our weapons safety training to reinforce the proper handling of weapons. This training will also be delivered biannually in person during weapons requalification, as well as annually online. All of the department's operational activities and management initiatives involve our most precious resource, which is our people. No one cares more about our people than I do. My goal has been and continues to be to create a work environment that provides the tools and training that our workforce needs to be successful in a well-managed and efficient manner. Our relationships with our labor unions are a key part of that goal. During my tenure, we successfully negotiated and ratified a new contract with the Teamsters, which is the labor union representing our covered civilian workforce. Additionally, I meet regularly with members of the Fraternal Order of Police Executive Board on issues of importance to our sworn workforce. We have also initiated negotiations with the FOP on a new contract, which will provide a labor management framework for our covered sworn workforce. These negotiations are ongoing. I would now like to briefly lay out for you my focus as we go forward. Before I do, I must acknowledge that I realize that I have not fully developed the relationships with you and others in leadership that I have needed to in order to be a completely effective leader. I came into the department facing many imminent operational activities and did not appropriately return my focus to establishing myself as a chief of police with the congressional community. I would like you to know that I'm committed to making the necessary effort to meet your expectations and to provide better communication with all of our oversight committees and congressional leadership. As you know, on May 1st, 2015, I appointed Matthew Verderosa as the Chief of Operations and Assistant Chief of Police after a 30-year career in federal law enforcement. He has served in many operational and administrative roles in the department, which I believe make him uniquely qualified to help me and my Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Richard Braddock, lead the department. In an effort to provide greater focus to our efforts, I have laid out a plan for achieving many necessary management activities over the next several months. I will be focused on developing the necessary relationships with the department stakeholders to be the most effective chief that I can be. I plan to enhance communications with our workforce and ensure the most efficient utilization of overtime. I plan to continue training for onboard sworn personnel for the remainder of FY 2015. I plan to complete promotions for the ranks of Deputy Chief, Inspector, and Captain, and continue to enhance the promotional process for the ranks of Lieutenant and Sergeant, which will be administered in late 2015 or early 2016. I will oversee the deployment of the department's new strategic plan in the coming weeks, which will provide greater focus for the USCP's efforts and allow our workforce to more clearly understand their role in achieving our mission responsibilities. Finally, I plan to continue to work with the FOP to address the remaining issues related to contract negotiations. My long-term focus over the next several years includes a plan to focus the department's energy in several areas which tie to our new strategic plan, which includes smart policing, deploying more effective law enforcement services through collaboration, adaptability, and innovation, and focusing on workforce efficiency and effectiveness through improved communications. To successfully achieve these goals, I am committed to taking the leadership actions necessary to build a management team who shares my vision and who will actively engage in all levels of the workforce. Given the huge responsibilities of this department and our entire workforce, I realize that the department's failure is not an option. I will continue to evolve my leadership style to ensure our success with meeting the mission, the needs of the workforce, and the community. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I would be very happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate that. And I think I'll just start off about the unattended firearms, which was probably, of anything, one of the bigger concerns since I've been here on the Hill. And you were just outlining what you would normally do in a case like that. I think you said 5-day suspension, something like that. I'm sure that depends on the personnel record of that particular individual, if there had been incidents in the past or not, et cetera. But it's also my understanding that some of these incidents happened with members of the force that were on sort of a special detail with leadership. And is there any, do you give that consideration, or what do you do in a case like that?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, obviously, each and every one of those is or will be or is in the process of being fully investigated. That is step one. Then we have a very good disciplinary process, which actually, prior to promoting Assistant Chief Verderosa, I had asked him to look at re-engineering our disciplinary process to make sure it was as effective and efficient and fast-moving as possible. So one of the changes, while we had an excellent system, I found that it was somewhat fragmented, and for an agency our size of the importance in terms of the disciplinary process, I believe that a centralized disciplinary process was necessary. So Assistant Chief Verderosa has put together a process which essentially centralizes the review process, which I think is better for all of the members of the agency and makes for a better system. That being said, the process includes, as you mentioned, looking at the Douglas factors, which come out of the Douglas versus Veterans Administration case, as you may be aware. Our collective bargaining agreement ensures that we, at least 4 of those are considered, which include the member's record, whether the act was willful or on purpose or not, and those kinds of things. So the member's record is taken into consideration, how long they've been on the department, their disciplinary record, what kind of act took place, its impact on the agency's ability to perform its mission, and those kinds of things. And then punishment is given out, and we've been very diligent in both investigating not only these matters but other matters and meting out appropriate punishment.
You know, just reading these media reports, obviously we're all biological human beings, so everyone has to go to the bathroom, and some of these incidents happen in the bathroom. So I don't know, and maybe this isn't the right question, but do you have like a lockbox, or are you going through is that already in place, or
Yes,
what
ma'am.
happens whether it's in a bathroom or wherever they are, that they have to take off their firearm for some short period of time, and how it's accounted for safely?
And that is a great question. We do provide lockboxes to our officers. Those are generally kept in their homes. There are lockboxes around in various office locations. So if someone has time, they may have the ability to go secure their weapon before they go to the bathroom. But as I mentioned in my opening testimony, we are now providing additional training on what to do when you have to go to the bathroom. Obviously, while these acts were not done on purpose, they are unacceptable. One cannot leave your weapon anywhere. It has to be secured at all times, and so those acts will be dealt with firmly and effectively. But we've enhanced the training, but we've made that now additional training as part of our biannual certification process, and we're creating online training that everyone will go through once a year as well. So we've enhanced and reinforced the whole discussion of weapon safety, because that's extremely critical, obviously.
Okay, my second question then would be about the gyrocopter incident. Again, you and I have talked about this. We've had a brief about it. We've talked about it at length. But as I continue to sort of contemplate what could have happened, what it meant, et cetera, what it could mean in the future, et cetera, I guess I do have a couple of questions. In regards to the officers that actually did respond, as I said, in my opinion, from a layman, I don't know, I don't understand your business, but it certainly looked as though the Capitol Police that responded did everything they were supposed to do flawlessly once the gyrocopter landed. So did you have, I'm wondering how much advance notice that the Capitol Police had? Again, understanding that the restricted airspace is not your responsibility. I'm not trying to throw some other agency under the bus, but I would like to know, to the extent that you can enlighten us, how much advance notice the Capitol Police had that this gyrocopter was coming, if boots on the ground understood that it was coming, or what exactly happened there in the critical moments before this gyrocopter did land. Thank God it was nobody that really meant us harm, but who knows?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, as you know, Chief, I also serve as the Vice Chair of the Homeland Security Committee, so from a Homeland Security standpoint, put my other hat on here for a moment, what in the world? And the after-action reports, perhaps, that you did with the men and women that did respond.
Yes, ma'am. A lot of great questions right there. And let me first say, from the outset, let me touch on the notification process so I can tell you once again, we fixed that the next day, working with Chief Verderosa. We directed that notifications be given out immediately. So we apologize for that. That's not acceptable for you to find out.
Actually, that was not my question. I appreciate the communication. I'm talking about how much notification the Capitol Police had about the gyrocopter coming.
Yes, ma'am. The notification to the gyrocopter that day, at, I believe, 12:59 hours, we received an email from someone claiming to be a reporter asking questions, did we have any knowledge about a gyrocopter landing? The information did not provide a time or date or indicate that landing was imminent or anything like that. It was more about, are you aware that this might be happening, and does the person have permission to do that? That email went to our public information officer, Lieutenant Kimberly Schneider, who sent it to our investigations division. About a minute later, we got a call in our command center, apparently from the same individual, asking generic type questions. Does somebody have a permit to land? Again, did not give a date or time or indicate that a landing was imminent. That information was also forwarded then to our investigations division. As those things began to be looked into, minutes later, frankly, the gyrocopter landed. Now, while on the West Front, about a minute before it landed, one of our officers was approached by someone who was apparently a reporter who knew that the gyrocopter was going to be landing, and asked the officer, are you aware of anybody, any airspace issues, anybody landing? I forgot the exact language. And the officer didn't know anything about it. He asked another officer. They went over the air. They made some notifications. Essentially, at that time, they observed the gyrocopter over the Grand Statue, and it landed on the West Front. So that was about a 25-minute time lapse from the time we got these generic pieces of information. And as you know, we get hundreds and hundreds of calls every day and emails about different permits, about different activities.
Yeah, I understand. The last thing I will say, because I know that everybody else wants to ask a question, it's my understanding you did get that email about a half an hour before the gyrocopter landed, along with a website for a live stream, that this guy was live streaming his flight. And so maybe somebody else wants to follow up on that, but it would seem as though somebody would tune in.
Well, and we attempted to tune in. We had no luck immediately. We ultimately did, that investigation continued, which allowed us, and I'd like to echo your praise of the officers' actions on the scene immediately. I think the officers acted properly, heroically, swiftly, and efficiently, and the continued investigation actually allowed us to determine what we were dealing with, because as the K-9 officer swept the gyrocopter and then our EOD folks approached it to continue to clear it, we were pulling up information about the person, who he was, and what kind of potential threat he was or was not. So that investigative effort kind of aided our whole overall effort and fit into our overall response. As you mentioned, it's not our role to patrol the airspace. That's a DOD NORAD responsibility, but we work very closely with them. We are working with the Department of Homeland Security on an after-action report from a larger sense. We're also doing an internal one as well. And I actually did, during Police Week last week, I had the opportunity to speak with Secretary Johnson about the matter, actually twice, which was pleased about, to be able to do that.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. And the chair recognizes my ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, far be it from me to sit here and make you feel uncomfortable or even to question you. But we're friendlies here. We're not the enemy here. My dad was in the police force. Mr. Nugent has many, many years of experience in law enforcement. I'd be talking to him every day. We are, a committee to oversight you. This is the first time I met you. Chief Morris was a friend. We were an oversight committee. He was a friendly toward us. Walk by, anytime you walk by the office, pop in, how are you, how you doing? That's good relationships. Philadelphia is known for cheesesteaks. We have the biggest cheesesteak restaurant in the city of Philadelphia, most famous nationwide. And they collect patches. And he wanted a patch from Capitol Police. So I went to Chief Morris. I said, I'd like to get a patch. He says, no, I'll go down, bring it to him. I want to have that great relationship and good PR, and he did that, And again, we don't want to be reactive. We want to act. If there's a problem, if there's an issue, your contract, I deal with your officers, with your unions all the time. You meet with them a lot, meet with us a lot. Walk by our office, say hello. I know you're busy, but we're busy too. We're not going to not say hello to you, And that's my issue. That's my problem. The lack, and I know you could be overwhelmed, and I do appreciate that, But if you could get a little more closer to us. We want to get closer to you. I've been involved in more contracts than anybody you know, including 2 of yours previously. You know, I do a lot of that in the city of Philadelphia when there's always a problem. You know, I'm the one they go to many, many times. And we're ready to help you. We've had discussions with me and the chairman all the time, you know, and we a little bit of wonder why we haven't got like more involved. We're not here to criticize you. I can't do your job. You could probably do mine, but I can't do yours. Or you can learn mine quickly enough. You know, rocket science to be a congressman. A little tough to be a police officer. We want to be helpful to you, and I really wish that you would take that in consideration. No request, nothing, just, you know, if you have requests, it'll certainly be on your part for us. We're supposed to be here to help you. And I wish you would take that consideration and get a little more friendly with all of us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I can guarantee you I will do that, and I appreciate your comments.
Chair recognizes Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Dine, you said there were 2 notifications that went into the Capitol Police prior to the landing of the gyrocopter. One went into the command center, and the other went to the public information officer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So the times of each of those, again, in advance of the landing?
I believe it was one was 12:59 and one was actually a minute later, where they made contact with us. It wasn't really, I don't know that I'd classify it as a notification. It was more of a question, were we aware of anything like this happening? But I think 12:59 and 1 o'clock.
And the landing was at 1:23, as I understand.
Yes, sir.
Correct? So were you notified yourself personally before it landed as based upon either of those contacts?
I don't believe I was notified before it landed.
Okay. Were there any weapons in place on behalf of the Capitol Police to protect the Capitol that could have shot down the gyrocopter?
Yes, sir. Weapons were in place. Without getting too deeply into it,
Sure.
we have various weapons deployed around the Capitol. So the short answer is yes. As with any use of force, then you get into an issue of whether the officer is threatened or the lives of anyone else is potentially threatened, and that whole decision-making process that police officers engage in every day, not only here at the Capitol, but across the country. But yes, sir, we have officers with weapons.
And Chief, you know, my concern is that most criminals don't telegraph the date and time of a criminal activity that they're going to engage in. This gentleman came as close to doing that as you can. And I understand he was not charged with any criminal offense. Is that correct?
No, sir, he was charged with several criminal offenses.
Was he? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Yes, sir. And I've actually discussed with several members on both the House and Senate side about looking at the sanctions of those offenses as well.
As far as your, and I understand you can't review every social media post or tweet or Facebook account that might be out there, but on a regular basis, is that being done just to try to monitor that, to see if anything shows up? I'm sure that's part of what you're doing.
Yes, sir, it is, and I'd be remiss, I guess, if I didn't also fill in the rest of this picture. This particular gentleman actually had been under investigation several years before by the U.S. Secret Service, who shared information with us about him potentially coming either to the White House and/or the Capitol. That was investigated by the Secret Service. It was investigated by our agency. We shared information. At that time, he was deemed to not be a threat. But we do engage in the activity you mentioned, and then determinations have to be made. And I think was alluded to earlier in the beginning of this hearing, we do receive thousands of pieces of information and various types of threats, and what we have to do is determine the level of threat.
And I understand multiple agencies are obviously involved in this process. They're sharing between those agencies. Many of these things you don't have any advance warning as potential. And while we're reviewing this, looking at ways that we can improve the reaction time, is our concern is what happens the next time, if there's a next time. We worry about someone else duplicating this. you know, a drone threat. Obviously, we've had some concerns of that in the area. So how we address this is a great concern. We look forward to engaging more with you on what we can do, what you're doing, how we can assist you, and we're, first of all, very appreciative of the job that the men and women do to protect the Capitol complex, and we thank you.
Thank you very much. And as it relates to drones, if I might add, we've been working to take a leadership position in that in the National Capital Region. Several months ago, we held a meeting with about 20 other law enforcement agencies and the U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General for the District of Columbia to talk about drones, the challenges that they create for state, federal, and local police agencies, the ways to combat drones, the types of charges that may be placed. And it was a very far and wide-ranging discussion. We're part of a task force that meets twice a month, multi-agencies, to talk about UAVs and how to address those issues. We're working with a number of agencies in that regard, and actually we're one of the leading agencies. We just recently put out training for all of our officers that some other agencies are mirroring in terms of drone education, frankly.
Thank you, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes Ms. Lofgren.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Brady and Chief. I've been here, I'm working on my 21st year, and I think this is the first time we've ever had the police before us, and I think it's long overdue. I do thank you for your testimony and certainly the men and women of the department who work so hard to protect the Capitol and the people who are here. Like some of the other members of the committee, I served for a long time in local government, and a lot of what I know about policing really comes from my experience in local government overseeing law enforcement agencies. And it seems to me that a lot of the trick of being successful is communication, clear lines of command, clear policies that officers not only understand the policies, but the reasons for the policies. And so I'm interested in hearing some of that from you. I remember in terms of communication, I understand we're not, the police, Capitol Police are not in charge of the airspace, but that's a communication issue. I remember after 9/11, obviously the Capitol was a target, there was disarray, and many weeks later, we had an all-hands briefing in the Capitol with a bipartisan meeting. And I can say this now because it's all, been changed, but one member asked the Sergeant-at-Arms, when did the Secret Service call the Capitol Police? When did that call come in? And the answer was, we're still waiting for that call. I mean, so I think the communication between other agencies there needs to be a protocol for that so that everybody knows what they're supposed to do. So I'm interested, some of that may be something you want to do in a private setting, I don't know, but I would like to know what those protocols are, whether the other parties are aware of the protocols, and whether there's any monitoring of those protocols. In terms of policies, we had the Naval Yard, a tragic situation, but one of the things that I thought was of concern was officers who left their station for the best reasons in the world, I am sure, to help in a very dire situation, but it raised a question in my mind, which is whether the clear policy, which is you don't leave the Capitol, and why is it? It's not because we're so wonderful, it's that if the Congress is destroyed, the United States government is destroyed. And if we had terrorists do a diversion, that might be a good way to leave the Congress, the legislative branch, vulnerable and a way to decapitate the American government. So I think that officers, if they knew what the clear policy was, everybody would get that. But I'm not sure that that policy is in place or whether it's been communicated. So I guess I don't want to overdo my welcome, but I am just concerned about the policies, the command structure, the communications with other agencies, and I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if we might have an opportunity in a confidential setting to get reports on those subjects. And I see that my time is up, so I would yield back.
I thank the gentlelady very much, and I certainly look forward to continuing our discussion about information that we need to have in a confidential setting, certainly. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Nugent, who has been mentioned, has spent many, many, many years as a law enforcement agent. We appreciate you being on our committee here today.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, Mr. Chairman. It's very important to me to hear from the chief. And Chief, once again, I think Mr. Brady hit it on the head. We're not here in an adversarial position, but we certainly have a lot of questions. At least I do. And, you know, I read through everything that the Capitol Police provided. I've tabbed it, looked at it, and I agree with Mr. Brady. This is the first time in 2.5 years that I've seen you, which is troubling, at least, to have that kind of open dialogue. But when we talk about, and the chairman brought it up, reference to the guns, that's like rule number one. That you, I'm sure, teach at the academy. You talk about handgun retention all the time. You do those things in a way that obviously has to impress upon the rank and file guys and gals about how important it is. And they understand it, trust me. I mean, you know this from your time, my time as a patrol officer. We understand how important that is. But the question I have is, one is it seems that there's not a lot of transparency in the disciplinary process within the Capitol Police. Secondly, when the members that the protective details are there to protect weren't even notified by the supervisor, and at one point in time, it took somebody from your command staff after they were notified by one of the, I won't say victim of it, but one of the folks that had knowledge of it, you never even notified the protectee, which is troubling to me. So, you know, I understand that one is already has been forwarded 6-day suspension, but it's still at the bureau level before it's implemented. Is that true?
Yes, sir. It's still in the process, but close to being fully adjudicated. Yeah.
Let me ask you a simple question about the 3 folks, or at least the 2 that are on protective detail. Are they removed from the detail?
They haven't been yet, but we will certainly be looking at their assignment. In fact, we're looking, in terms of policies and procedures, one of the things we are looking at is rotation of personnel throughout the agency.
I understand, but you, in your policy, I read that you do have the ability for disciplinary reasons to remove somebody from an assignment, because that's pretty gross. That's a gross problem if you leave a gun, and particularly when a child sees it.
Absolutely. There's literally no excuse for it.
And, you know, and I would think from the rest of the folks that work protecting all of us, that they would expect that, you know, that type of violation of the rules would be held pretty high, and the discipline would be pretty quick. So everybody understands, because, you know, I mean, put it in policy, hey, listen, don't leave your gun in the bathroom. And that's common sense 101, right, Chief? I mean, so to press that point, though, to all the other rank and file folks that, hey, listen, this isn't going to be accepted, and particularly somebody on a protective detail, because that's quite a responsibility to have that position. And obviously, they did a great job at whatever position they had, I would think, to get elevated to that.
Right.
And so the question has been, at least raised in the press, is that we only find out about this stuff if it's somehow leaked. Are you going to do something different with the Capitol Police in regards to violations of policy? So I think this committee at least should be aware of those types of problems, so we can assist you in doing the things that you need to do, whether it's in funding or it's placing, like the chairman mentioned, lock boxes, as we used to do when you went into court, or you went somewhere where there's a prisoner, and I know you sure have those at the office, that you have those in strategic areas within wherever a protectorate may be.
Yes, sir. And obviously, we need to do, and I need to do a better job at briefing you and spending time with you, so you're fully aware of of how the department operates and our practices, so you feel confident in those issues and the things that do exist. And then, of course, we have to continue to take these things seriously and do something about them.
Were the people that these officers were protecting, were they notified? Were the Speaker of the House and them, or others notified of the violation of policy with the weapon unattended?
At some point, the chain of command was notified in terms of that side. Yes, sir. When that happened, if that happened as soon as it should have, I don't know the answer to that. But obviously, people need to know, and personnel practices aren't generally obviously discussed in the media. But I would like for you to hear about these kinds of things from me or
And
my
Chief, you're
representative.
hitting it on the head. That's the last place I can remember being as sheriff. I didn't want to read about it in the newspaper
Exactly.
when somebody hasn't told me. One last question on the gun issue, and I don't want to beat this to death. But the supervisor that was aware of the officer leaving his firearm or her firearm unattended didn't notify the chain of command reference to that violation. What is happening to that supervisor?
That will be addressed as well, because as you mentioned, there has to be a notification process for that supervisor. That's part of the role of being a supervisor,
Right.
is taking action. Yes, sir.
And once again, and I know that investigations take a while, but I would suggest that this is a pretty simple investigation as compared to some that we've had to investigate over the course of our careers that, you know, need an extension. Like you said, you have 60-day rule and you can extend to 120. I get it. I had to do it too. But these types of actions need to be pretty swift, I would think, just for your rank and file, so they know that, you know, people are held accountable.
Absolutely. I think that's the whole key to good discipline, is that it be swift and sure and effective and change the behavior of that's the whole purpose for it, right?
Well, that's what discipline's all about. I mean,
Exactly.
you try to coach and counsel and do all those things, but ultimately they have to know there's a penalty if you do that. And my last question, if you'd indulge me, is really about the email that was sent reference the gyrocopter. The email that you referenced that came in at 12:59 p.m. on April 15th, and the subject says, questions, a man flying gyrocopter towards U.S. Capitol. That's pretty succinct, I think, and it says, hi, I'm a reporter for the Tampa Bay Times. A local man, as a protest, is flying a gyrocopter and is trying to land on the lawn of the Capitol. He says he's notified all relevant authorities. His name is Doug Hughes. And more, they give the address, because my staff went on there and was watching it as it occurred, as he live streamed his flight from Gettysburg. And it goes on to say, do the Capitol Police know? Have they okayed this flight? And landing, and please call me. So he gave a phone number. Here's my concern, is that that's pretty specific, and that, A, it took how long before you were notified, and those at the Capitol, and those that possibly, who knows what the intent of this guy is? And that's the problem, is when the guy climbs the fence at the White House, you don't know what his intent is. We don't want to wait to find out what their intent is, because then we're in a mode, our guys and gals do a great job of making the arrest, but we'd rather not be there. And so my question is, when were you notified that there was a threat to the Capitol?
I was notified, I believe, essentially immediately as it happened.
As what happened?
As he landed.
To me, it just seems like it would be all hands on deck when you get an email like this and you have the website to go to, that bells should be ringing, sirens should be blaring within your chain of command as to, this is pretty damn important, excuse my language, but it is. And so what I worry about is that whoever got this information just said, you know, we get this stuff all the time. Well, this is fairly specific. Would you not agree?
Very specific and obviously unique in that regard. Obviously, didn't say the same, you know, that it was happening, but one could reason that this.
I mean, if you read it, fairly obvious, and the reporter gives his phone number so you can contact me. It wasn't like he was just, leaving something. Because when was, let me ask you this, the Sergeant at Arms, when was he notified of this email?
We made notifications to the Sergeant at Arms immediately. I don't recall, I can go back and check when they were apprised of the email and the phone call, because we gave them a timeline of what happened. Within very quickly after the event, I gave them a timeline of all the things that had happened.
Chief, did he get a copy of this email?
Did Sergeant Arms get a copy?
Get a copy of it.
I know I gave them a timeline. I don't know that the email itself was attached, but we gave them a synopsis report very close to the event.
We had the Sergeant at Arms in here and asked him questions about this, because obviously, we're concerned, and we don't want to get into any of the classified portion of it.
Right.
That I would hope we could do at a later date. I sit on Armed Services, so we have a lot of classified sessions afterwards. But my question, the Sergeant at Arms was very, I don't think he was vague on purpose, but based upon what you're saying, is he didn't relate any of this like it's in this email to us. And so I'm concerned about that. And that's why if you didn't notice him with this email, I think that's problematic, at least for the Sergeant at Arms, and I can't speak for him. So I yield back. I see I'm out of time. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. We can have a second round of questions, but I'd like to now recognize Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before I go into the questions I had, I just want to piggyback on something that my colleague, Mr. Nugent, was talking about with this email. We're concerned. That email was very, very specific. How many, on average, emails like that do you get a day?
About gyrocopters, that's
About threats.
probably not many gyrocopter emails.
So you don't get specific emails like that?
We
on
get a
regular-
lot of letters, calls, various types of threats or matters of direction is what we call them. If they're not, they all fall under the threat category. We get probably a couple thousand of those a year.
A year?
From all, of all
But you don't-
types, shapes, and sizes.
But Chief, you don't get a lot of specific ones, like Doug Hughes is flying a gyrocopter today on the Capitol lawn, right?
No, we don't get many about gyrocopters landing on the Capitol lawn, no,
All
sir.
right, well, that's the first time I've seen that email in our packets, and it is specific enough to, I think, warrant some issues. That went to the public information officer, correct? Is that a generic account, or did that go to somebody that monitors that on a regular basis?
No, it went to our lieutenant who's in charge of that office, and then, as I mentioned, we got a call.
Has that lieutenant immediately, did that lieutenant immediately turn that information around? Or-
She sent it, I think, within 5 or 6 or 7 minutes to our investigators.
But still, you mentioned in your testimony, and you mentioned here today in the questions, that you didn't learn about this until it was happening.
Yes,
So we did miss a little bit of a timeline. Has that PIO been notified that if you may want to act a little more quickly on such specific information?
We've discussed the matter, yes, sir.
Is that PIO going to be disciplined?
She won't be disciplined, but we have discussed the matter.
Okay. Well, and it gets to my main point. Look, we understand. I will bet you common sense will prevail, and no officer will ever leave a firearm in a toilet-covered dispenser again in the Capitol complex. We will likely not see many gyrocopters try and land on the lawn because we're reactive. And I know, hopefully you didn't have to put a specific provision in your training manual about not leaving firearms in toilet paper or toilet-covered dispensers, but that's a reaction. What is the Capitol Police doing to be more proactive? What can we do to simplify the contact process so that all of us on Capitol Hill understand what's actually happened? What can we do? What can you do as a Capitol Police to simplify the notification process when you get a specific email like my colleague Mr. Nugent just read to the committee? How do we make things more simple so that we don't just have you come in to react to a certain situation, or in this case, multiple situations?
And that was, the notification process was something that needed to be fixed and resolved. So I guess never letting a good crisis go to waste. The next day, Chief Verderosa and I met, and we directed that immediate notifications go out to you about incidents up here. There was a fairly antiquated bureaucratic overly complicated notification process. We've bypassed that and directed that notifications go out. And I'll apologize in advance if you get too many notifications now, but I would rather you be notified and than not be notified, and that your complaint is that you got too much information than not. So we immediately fixed that literally the next day in terms of that notification process.
So you fix those certain situations to react to the gyrocopter incidents and the leaving of firearms at certain facilities incidents. Are there any other issues that you're looking at overall within the Capitol Police to be more proactive, to maybe look at simplifying your protocols and your training methods to ensure that we don't even have these situations again?
Well, I can tell you from 40 years of doing this, I hate to say this, there's probably going to be some other incident of somebody doing something. But what we have done, as I mentioned, we've clarified the training. We've added more training to make sure we're discussing it every time officers qualify, which is twice a year. And then we've added online training. As it relates to gyrocopters and UAVs and those kinds of things, we have new training we just put online, and I think we're one of the few agencies that did that. And as I mentioned, we have now other agencies using that, mirroring that training to make them aware of those kinds of things. And that's an awareness piece of what to do when you see a UAV or a drone or those kinds of things, because that's a kind of a fairly unique episode.
Well, Chief, it looks like my time's expired, but let me end by saying this. I hope you understand that all of us around this committee, we want to work with you. I'm brand new to the committee, unlike my colleagues who mentioned earlier that they haven't had a chance to really work with you. But we're all here to be an asset to what you're trying to do. The men and women who protect this Capitol complex and the tourists who come and visit on a regular basis do a great job. We want to help you help them and help you succeed in your job. So use us to be helpful. Use us to help create more proactive procedures and policies, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chief Dine, I believe this is the third hearing that I've been part of on the House Oversight and Homeland Security. Maybe we've even had a classified hearing or two. I do want to zero in basically two questions today. And I want to start with going back to your notes on page 5. It says in February 2014, the department fully implemented its new digital encrypted radio system without issues or communication service interruptions. It also says this new radio system provides coverage to the Capitol complex and is now available in areas that previously did not receive radio communications. I'm on page 5. Now here's the important part. It says it also has allowed for greater interoperability. To date, the department has the ability to conduct the inoperable radio communication bridges with more than a dozen other agencies. This equipment allows both parties to communicate directly on each other's radio systems in order to broadcast critical information in a timely manner. Now, according to my timeline, there looks to be about 23 or 24 months. Can you tell me, was that radio system in play, and were these agencies interacting as far as when they first found out over those 24 minutes?
We did interact, I believe, but we did not use the radio system for this particular incident. It is interoperable. We have interoperability with the D.C. Police, U.S. Park Police, Secret Service, FBI, SWAT team, and a number of other agencies. This.
Can you tell me what did you use? Telephone? What? I mean, this looks like it's a state-of-the-art, real-time.
It was, and as I think we discussed in some of the other hearings, if I recall correctly, an officer from Park Police saw the gyrocopter, and I believe a Secret Service officer may have. They made their notifications. They also made notifications to the people that oversee the CRCC.
Right.
We actually were not notified till we saw it.
Well, as my colleague, Mr. Davis, was just talking about, if we have this kind of technology, I don't understand when there's not kind of an all-points bulletin going on throughout all these agencies. I'm assuming these are two-way radios.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Let me move to my next question here. You also talked about, and I guess you've been here about 2.5 years, and from what I've read and heard, you're doing a fine job. There is a communication concern, and you said your goal was to provide, I believe, a quote, better communication. I admire and I appreciate that goal, but can you give me some of the action steps that you might say this is how we can implement better communication from our department to yours? And after you finish that response, I will yield back to the chairwoman. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, as I mentioned, we're going to do a better job communicating with you with notifications, and I am personally going to do a better job meeting with and communicating with you, and I look forward to that. Internally, though, it is really important that we communicate with our whole department. And I was talking to a young officer a month or so ago, one night in the evening. I'm around kind of all hours of the day and night. And the officer said something that was pretty brilliant, because things go out in the media and there's discussion. And he said to me, he said, well, Chief, sometimes then all we know is what we read, because we don't hear what the whole other side is or what the department side is. And you know, sometimes you learn the best things from the officers on the ground. And I've never forgotten that, having been a police officer for now, in a couple of weeks, it'll be 40 years. So we need to get our message out to our people when there's a story to tell about what happened and what happened right and what happened wrong and what the actual story is. So we are going to be putting out more messages in that regard and have more interactions with our people at all levels.
Thank you, Chief. Madam Speaker, yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Chief, I have a couple of other questions, I think, as well, before we conclude here. One is, going back to my Homeland Security, and Mr. Walker and I both sit on that committee also, but, you know, when you go to the southern border, you're looking at rheostats there, the eye in the sky. This is very sophisticated technology, and they're utilizing it. In many cases, it's already surplus stuff from the Department of Defense, things that, equipment that has been extremely effective in theater, whether you're trying to secure a border between Afghanistan and Pakistan or the Rio Grande or what have you. It's the eye in the sky. And so just the ability to be looking at something like that, is I think we can say this publicly, when you were looking at this gyrocopter, it is difficult sometimes for radar to pick up various kinds of things, right? And I mean, technology is exploding every day, whether it's UAVs, whether it's drones. I mean, they're going to be using drones to deliver your taco here pretty soon. I mean, this is what's coming. So how can you be able to assess using technology that's available as quickly as you can? This kind of equipment is very expensive as well, although, again, I mean, the expense of it is something you have to take into consideration, but you need to tell us or ask us, because we're the ones that have to get the money, make the priorities of what we are doing and what we're expending money on to keep the Capitol and the campus here secure. But really, much of this equipment is already, I think, unless the CBP has already got most of the good stuff, but it is something that you may want to take a look at. It is incredibly effective. I mean, I've been in the stations, the ground stations. It's unbelievable how clearly you can see from high distances everything that's going on, and the ability then to immediately, using communications, to tell, again, the boots on the ground, look, this is happening. You don't have to just be patrolling back and forth here looking for something. They're going to say, this is happening here, now, go there. It's unbelievable technology that, again, I'm a layman, but it seems to me that may be something you could utilize here.
Yes, ma'am, we are looking at that. We actually had a briefing this morning, and I would look forward to briefing you in a confidential setting about some of the things that we're looking at, and you already know what they do for you. But there is a lot of technology out there that's being worked. We're working that on every level with pretty much every agency in the country. We're part of that effort to make sure that we're in on what's needed. The gap, frankly, or where the gap needs to be closed is once the vehicle is identified, then what do you do about it? And that's essentially what happened here. Even if we knew it was coming, then do you determine, you know, what's the action taking once you've identified it? But clearly, the earlier we know about it and the earlier we can identify it, the better we can make decisions about evacuations, which is a big part of how we use our systems now, and whether any use of force, either by us or DOD, which really plays a main role, is appropriate. So you're right, early identification is critical.
And I mean, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. Obviously, the bad guys know we have this equipment. So it's not like it's some big secret, right? We do utilize it. The other question I would ask you, because this is something that has been talked about quite a bit. I said in my opening statement that obviously we all recognize the challenges that are being faced by police departments across the country because of a number of reasons, various incidents that have happened recently. What is your thought about body cameras? There's been a lot of talk about whether or not that is a good thing, whether it's an expenditure of funds that is worthwhile or it's not. Does it help the police? Does it not? Does it help does it help all the way around to be able to demonstrate exactly what had happened there? And I think the Capitol Police don't use them now, and I don't know if there's been some thought given to whether or not you're interested in pursuing that. What is your thought about these body cameras? I know there's a lot of talk about them.
There is a lot of talk about it, and I'd like the committee to know that we stay abreast of that. Obviously, as you might expect, I meet with chiefs from around the country regularly at conferences and forums. The Police Executive Research Forum, who's located right here in Washington, D.C., they've taken a leadership role in that. They've put out basically, I think, one of the seminal sort of reports on the use of body cameras and how those are implemented, working with chiefs that have implemented them. I think they are a good tool. I would opine that, like any piece of technology, they're not a panacea. What's concerning a little bit as we think future to some next piece of technology, are we going to get to the point where a police officer, without a body camera, the police officer's testimony is worthless? That's concerning to me, frankly. I haven't done this for so long, but do I think it's a potentially useful tool? Yes. So we are monitoring that very closely to see if it's something that would be appropriately utilized here. There are still a lot of privacy questions about what happens to the information, how it's protected, and those kinds of things that while there's some best practices opinions about that, have not been fully determined. That's one of the debates going on right here in Washington, D.C. What happens to those videos, and do they end up on YouTube, and those kinds of things. But we are closely monitoring. I've actually read the PERF report, so I'm up to date on, I think, where things are as it relates to that technology.
Okay. Well, I would just say in regards to that, if you come to the conclusion or recommendation that that's something you do want to pursue, again, you can make a proposal to us, and I mean, we want to be your advocate if we can, and are in agreement with what you're looking for. And the last question, and I'm not sure that, and if you don't want to answer this question, you don't have to. But I do want to, I mentioned in my opening statement, I personally have some consternation about the current wiring diagram for your management structure. I don't care whether it's you or who the next person is going to be. Just because the way that the Capitol Police Board is, the construct of it, as I say, it's been in existence for a very long time, and I think it probably has worked well. On the other hand, the largest room is always a room for improvement, and it is 2015. Perhaps it's time for us to think about whether or not having the Sergeant-at-Arms in the Senate and the Sergeant-at-Arms in the House, and then the architect of the Capitol, deciding who is going to, hiring, firing, disciplining, whatever. Those are you have three bosses. I have about 750,000 bosses, but you have three, and it is, I can't, that's got to be a very difficult thing. And I'm just not sure it serves us as well as it could. So I'm not sure if I'm really asking you, since those are your bosses, what you think about that structure, but I certainly throw it out to the committee members as well to digest it all a bit. And I think we may want to think about if that's adequate or whether or not we could improve that. And if you'd like to comment, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Well, I would just say that I think that the board, the board wears several hats, and I work with them in both of those arenas. They wear their hats in their individual role as the Sergeant-at-Arms for the House or the Senate or the architect, and we work with them and their staffs individually each and every day in terms of all the issues that we deal with individually for their entity. And while I'm at it, we also work very closely with you and your staffs, and we appreciate the oversight that you and your staffs and all the committees have provided to us, and I've relied heavily on the outstanding people I have that have done that, but that's no excuse for me not personally meeting with you, which I look forward to doing. So we have a lot of interaction with the staffs, and often they act as buffers as a police, but then they wear their police board hat, where ostensibly they're coming together as a cohesive entity to give, guidance and direction and oversight. So we work with them, I guess, on several levels, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, very well. Any other questions, Mr. Ranking Member?
Yeah, just quickly, Madam Chairman, thank you for having this hearing because I got an opportunity to meet the Chief of Police of Capitol Hill. And I do need to get to know you better for a lot of reasons because I work here and I'm worried about the people that visit here. But also you're coming to my city in 2016. Coming to Philadelphia, we have a convention there. And I would like to, get to know you better. There's a lot of logistics that are there. Philadelphia's a kind of unique place. Everybody's in charge and everybody's smarter than everybody else. And I'd just like to fill you in with all that and make sure that you don't step on any landmines while you're there. So I do need to get a little bit to know you better. You need to get to know me and our committee better. Madam Chair, thank you for having this hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank you very much, and I'm certain you're going to have the chief bringing a patch to that cheeseburger, cheesesteak place.
I failed to say that, and this person is also the biggest around, and he's also a major law enforcement supporter, and he closes down his shop 3 or 4 times a year for 2 or 3 days. I mean, he doesn't close it down, he keeps it open, but all the proceeds goes to the police officers. I'm talking about probably up to maybe a couple $1 million. Wow. So it was worth it, and I was proud to bring my chief of police down there, and he wanted to put the patch on the wall, and he put it right in the middle of all many, many other patches. So you come down, and I'll fatten you up with a cheesesteak.
Very good.
I appreciate that.
Gentleman from Florida?
I just have a comment about Philadelphia, just in passing. Been there for a lot of Army-Navy games, and you're right, there is a great place. There's a couple places that actually have pretty good cheesesteak, but I know the one you're talking about. And Chief, I would just say that, in reading your response and all that, I think if you follow through with those things, that'll be a good thing. But you hit on something, that's near and dear to my heart, where you were talking to one of the guys on the street. I found, and I'm sure you did too, it's, management by walking around, it's nothing against your command staff, but I used to have my command staff come in and say, boss, how do you know that? And it's amazing the things that you'll hear from those folks that actually do the job. Command staff is great, but, they have their reasons to do whatever to insulate you or whatever, and I think it's real important that if you're not having town hall meetings with your folks, you ought to. It's a great opportunity. And in the unions, I had the FOP as a union for my sworn patrol officers and below sergeant. They were actually my best ally in dealing with budget issues as it relates to benefits and salaries. So I would just say that that's something you can really, really encourage. And so with that, I yield back. I thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. Lofgren?
I think this has been helpful, and I'm hopeful that we can have a follow-up meeting soon for some of the other issues that we either need to discuss confidentially or would like to raise in a less public setting because of security reasons. But I would like to, at that time, to discuss with the chief efforts to provide security outside of the Capitol in our district offices, and also how we're using security to sort through the incoming, because there's a lot of, if you get, 1,000 emails a day, there's a way to mine that using technology to sort through what's likely to be a problem and what isn't. And I don't know if that's being done at this point, but it's something I'd like to explore further. With that, thank you. I'll yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. I thank all the committee members. Pardon me? I second that. Very good. I thank everybody, all the committee members. Obviously, Chief, we had excellent attendance here today with a very engaged group of members who have a lot of questions and concerns. And I think everybody asked them very well, and your testimony was very good, and your answers as well, although I think some of us are still scratching our head a little bit about some of these things, but I will say that if there's one takeaway from this hearing that I think you can see very clearly, the members of Congress just have the utmost respect for the United States Capitol Police and the jobs that, and you're here representing your force of almost 2,000 folks here, and some of your staff and your folks are here today, and we tell you that in all sincerity. We thank you each and every day, and there are so many incidents, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that we never hear about. You know, never hear about these things. They just are handled. They're handled. And so we're just very, very appreciative of your willingness, and everybody comes to work willingly each and every day to protect this campus, and as I say, most importantly, all the Americans that are here. And we do, as a committee, stand ready to work to continue to work shoulder to shoulder with you and your entire force on our common goal of just keeping ourselves secure and keeping this campus secure and protecting democracy and freedom and liberty, all of those things. So we thank you very much, and without objection, I will also mention that all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair any additional written questions for the witness, which we will forward and ask him to respond as promptly as he could, so that their answers, so that answer could be made part of the record as well. And without objection, the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.